You used God to put me in the back of the bus. Have you no shame? God created every person in this room. Are you saying that God made a mistake? This is not about God, it's about men who choose to discriminate against other people because they have the power to do so. My record will not show that I voted against Mr. Cicilline having his rights. My record will show that when I had the opportunity to deliver liberty and justice for all, I voted for rights for all.
Our opening clip was Texas Representative Al Green in 2021 standing up for trans rights, and Republicans claiming that their hateful, genocidal rhetoric and legislation putting a target on the heads of trans people and their loved ones, and as well as trans children, was God's will, which it simply is not. In fact, Jesus in the New Testament could not have been clearer. He simply said, love one another. Thank you, Al Green, for fighting for human rights, fighting for truth, and fighting for justice. More on that later. This week's bonus show focuses on the concept of controlled opposition, Vichy Democrats who refuse to confront Republican fascism. Why do they do it? What's in it for them? In a dictatorship, no one is safe. Even former allies of Putin have found themselves falling out of windows or exploding midair. The Senate is set to vote on the extreme Republican spending bill, which will cut essential life-saving programs like Head Start and community health centers to funnel billions more into the Pentagon and Homeland Security. This comes at a time when Trump is threatening to invade Canada and Greenland, while ICE is denying legal due process to green card holders like Mahmoud Khalil, arrested for protesting the U.S.-funded genocide and war crimes by Netanyahu against Palestinians. That chilling violation of the First Amendment threatens all of us. The Republican spending bill will also slash Washington, D.C.'s budget at a time when the Capitol is reeling from a mass purge of federal employees. A vindictive move by Trump because Washington, D.C., one of the most educated populations in the country, resents him and leads protests against him. One of these protests, happening today, March 14th, is led by veterans seeing their VA benefits gutted while Republican officials mock them as their jobs are being taken away. Is MAGA the Antichrist? As Gaslit Nation has definitively pointed out over the years, yes, MAGA epitomizes ego, cruelty toward vulnerable groups, the very definition of evil. The Republican spending bill also gives Trump and Musk a green light to continue their illegal mass purge of our government, effectively denying Congress its constitutional power of the purse. This means it shields Trump and Musk in court cases attempting to stop their unconstitutional mass purge. Remember, Mike Johnson is the lawyer who devised the legal strategy to overturn the 2020 election. The Republican spending bill is legal warfare to protect Trump and Musk from the courts, one of the few remaining levers of power we have. Any Democrat voting for this is complicit in evil. It's simply untrue that a government shutdown will empower Trump and Musk to escalate their purge and blame Democrats. Historically, shutdowns don't last long, and Republican approval ratings are plummeting thanks to Trump and Musk. A shutdown forces Democrats to go out and make the case that the Republican spending bill is a power grab to legitimize Trump and Musk's illegal tech-backed coup, trying to replace federal workers with AI creating a new surveillance state. Welcome to this week's bonus show. I am your host, Andrea Chalupa, a journalist and filmmaker and the writer and producer of the journalistic thriller, Mr. Jones, about Stalin's genocide famine in Ukraine, a genocide that continues today under Putin. Ukraine agreed to a ceasefire, but did Russia? No, the Kremlin is gaslighting. Russia doesn't want a ceasefire. They want Ukraine to become easier to invade while buying time to rebuild because their economy is on the brink of collapse. And the Russian military, the second most powerful military in the world, we've been told for years, is now relying on donkeys. Donkeys, okay? And so, yes, the Russians desperately need to fool everyone into thinking there's a ceasefire so the world will turn its back and go back to quote-unquote business as usual while Russia restocks, re-strategizes, and re-invades. That's what's happening. Gaslit Nation listeners know that Russia has broken several ceasefire agreements before. So what's next? Europe is being forced to step up to fill the void because America has a convicted felon, Russian asset, and traitor to the Constitution in the White House, who's literally trying to invade Canada to further weaken and divide the democratic world and pull NATO's resources away from Ukraine to further help Russia invade and occupy that country. But it's a losing battle. Russia simply does not have what it takes to occupy a massive, fiercely independent, and strongly educated and prepared population like Ukraine that's one of the leading countries for IT in the world and was the entire industry of Soviet might and rocket science during the space race. You simply don't fuck with Ukraine for so many reasons. Just like the idiots in the South, the drunkards of the Confederacy should not have fucked with the highly educated, industrialized North. That same dynamic is playing out between Ukraine and Russia. It is a losing war that Russia cannot win, even with their idiot in the White House. Have hope, America. Former wannabe autocrat of the Philippines, Rodrigo Duterte, was just arrested and taken to The Hague, Trump and Putin's future home. Duterte, one of the real-life villains from the Gaslit Nation graphic novel, Dictatorship, It's Easier Than You Think, was arrested by the International Criminal Court for his violent, disinformation-fueled, quote, drug crackdown, end quote, echoing Trump's own attack on American democracy. Trump, Putin, and Musk will be brought to justice. The Hague is getting warmed up for them. Trump and Musk's approval ratings are plummeting, much like Tesla's stock. How do we get there? By collectively fighting back. Today, March 14th, there's a demonstration in Washington, D.C., organized by veterans and Jessica Denson of the Lights On podcast, among other great groups. I was proud to speak there today, virtually, about how our collective goodwill will defeat the stupidity of evil. I recorded my remarks, sent them to Jessica Denson. They will be available online, so you can check that out. We also will fight back, America, by holding our elected officials, especially Democrats, accountable to the U.S. Constitution. Gaslit Nation has warned for years that Vichy Democrats were complicit in helping Trump avoid accountability and come back to power. Some of these Democrats include John Fetterman, the child of rich Republicans, and Chuck Schumer, a patsy who is either bought or fearful or both. What's clear is that New York Representative Alexandra Ocasio-Cortez has emerged as the de facto leader of the resistance. People across the political spectrum on social media are calling for AOC to primary Chuck Schumer. Would AOC win in that fight? Yes. Though New York has a few conservative districts, they're very few, and many are more purple than red. Republicans in our state also benefit from a horribly inept state Democratic Party destroyed from within by Jay Jacobs, who couldn't even hold down his native Long Island. AOC as a national figure would rake in donations and volunteers from across the country, desperate to see real leadership instead of Neville Chamberlain Schumer. Why do some Democrats behave like handmaidens of fascism, like Vichy Democrats? This week's bonus show continues the discussion with Gil Durán of the Third Reich newsletter. Gil spent many years working for Democrats in California. from Attorney General Kamala Harris to Governor Jerry Brown. Now he writes Third Reich, covering the oligarchs like Musk and Thiel who want to replace our democracy with tech fascist network states, CEO King fiefdoms. And he co-writes the FrameLab newsletter with Dr. George Lakoff on political messaging in an age of rampant disinformation. I'll link to both in the show notes. In this discussion, we name names, analyzing who among the Democrats are controlled opposition, pretending to fight for the people while actually serving the oligarchy. If there's anyone you're suspicious of, send me a note through Patreon. Anyone can message us there. Let me know who you're thinking about that may be controlled opposition. Who are you keeping an eye on? Because we need to name names and get these people out of power, primary them, and refuse to normalize Democrats being complicit in helping fascist Republicans destroy our democracy. To hear the full discussion, be sure to subscribe at patreon.com/gaslit. Thank you to everyone who keeps our show going. But first, in tribute to the good Democrats fighting the good fight, Texas Rep. Al Green censored for rightfully calling out MAGA's tech-backed coup during Felon 47's State of the Union. 10 Vichy Democrats voted with the Russian-backed MAGA Nazis in Congress to censor Green, who will be remembered in America's long civil rights history. Those Democrats are Amy Barra of California, Ed Case of Hawaii, Jim Costa of California, Laura Gillen of New York, Marie Glosenkamp Perez of Washington, Jim Hines of Connecticut, Christy Holohan of Pennsylvania, Marcy Kaptur of Ohio. Marcy, you should know better. Jared Moshkovitz of Florida, and Tom Suozzi of New York, who just plain sucks. And we need to replace him, New York. New York is always center to the fight for America's freedom. The Wall Street sprouted up, funding slavery, ensuring slave ships, but then the abolition movement was here. And that same dynamic of good and evil here in New York is playing out today as, again, we are fighting for the soul of our country and forcing progress to be free and move forward and refusing to go back. So in honor of Al Green and all the good Democrats out there, we're going to play this clip of Green singing with other allies of democracy the civil rights protest anthem, "We Shall Overcome," as traitor Mike Johnson was forced to pause MAGA's power grab, buying us some precious time as Congress adjourned.
By its adoption of House Resolution 189, the House has resolved that Representative Al Green be censured, that Representative Al Green forthwith present himself in the well of the House of Representatives for the pronouncement of censure, and that Representative Al Green be censured with public reading of this resolution by the Speaker. The House had come to order. The House had come to order. What's it?
You want to let him keep doing this, or it's only fair?
The House had come to order. Clear the well, please. Clear the well. The House has to continue its business.
And if you want to declare a recess, you can do that too. And the mic's on.
Just say the House is in recess. Pursuant to Clause 12A of Rule 1, the House will stand in recess, subject to the call of the chair.
I want to ask you about controlled opposition. In Russia, there's several political parties that pretend to be in opposition to the Kremlin. They say things like "no war," and that rallies a sense of, Russians that have a sense of decency, that don't want to go to war with Ukraine, where their cousins live and their friends are. But then these controlled opposition parties say, oh, but we have to support our troops. We have to support our country until victory. That's controlled opposition. That is what the Democrats sound like. They campaign on saying Trump's bad, he's an authoritarian, it's Project 2025, but we have to have decorum. We have to respect the office of the president. We have to confirm all of these horrible unqualified people to be in cabinet positions to pillage our government. And so they're operating like controlled opposition. And I want to ask you about some specific names and just to get your insight, because you've been in the room with these people and there's always this debate. Is it malice? Is it stupidity? Is it just good old fashioned greed? In terms of the spectrum, like who is obviously closer towards control opposition, some folks that I have questions about, just asking questions, is obviously Ro Khanna, because he is the congressional rep for Silicon Valley. And he has said some things very early on troubling about Ukraine. And of course, there's a lot of Russian money in Silicon Valley. And Ro Khanna, there have been times very early on where he sounded like a David Sachs when it came to Ukraine. So, there's reports that he is close with these guys and he missed some important vote at one point or whatever. But what are your thoughts on that person?
Well, he has a lot of masters to serve, right? And then other times, Ro Khanna sounds very progressive on some things. And then people like him. That's how I first remember hearing about him, was in the context of being progressive. It kind of reminds me of the mayor in The Nightmare Before Christmas, with just a bunch of faces rotating. There's a lot of politicians like this, right? So I think, he's trying to find a way to split the difference and preserve the wealthy part of his constituency while still keeping his seat in a district where you have to also at least pretend to care about working class people and regular voters. And I think it doesn't really work for the most part. I don't know if there's anything nefarious there. I think a lot of these people are just sort of weak individuals who want to stay in office at all costs. And so it results in all these contortions. And I have no doubt that he's got rich people in his ear telling him that this is the way it is. And then he goes around saying it until he gets enough pushback that he has to modulate his stance. So yeah, I think he's a guy trying to serve a lot of different masters. And then every once in a while he throws some punch that seems like it's more progressive or anti-Elon, but for the most part, he does seem to be on board with these technological shifts that are only one way in terms of whose power and interests they serve.
We saw Mitch McConnell shut things down when Obama was president, and he was in the minority party. Yet you have Chuck Schumer scared of his own shadow. Where would you place Chuck Schumer?
Chuck Schumer has been pimping crypto. Any Democrat who's pimping crypto is not valuable in terms of defending the country. If you don't understand the purpose of crypto, which is to undermine the US dollar, to undermine American power in the world, then you're really not in a position to be in leadership. And, Chuck Schumer did a lot to help push Feinstein off of the stage because she was too old. And I think that was a valid thing to do. Now, I didn't really fully see at the time. I used to work for Feinstein, so I didn't see, I was a little more on her side. But in the end, it turned out, yeah, she was really fading and shouldn't have been in there. I think Chuck Schumer's fading pretty fast as well. And, I think it's sort of elder abuse that his staff has him out there pretending to be for crypto. And I doubt he even knows what the hell crypto really is, except that it's a source of money and power. And so, again, if you're trying to make a deal with these people, you are collaborating, not doing the job of opposing. And I think so. It's been very disappointing to see that with Chuck Schumer. More scary than what these fascists want is the Democrats who are bowing down to them. That's the scarier part to me.
1,000,000,000%. I'm not afraid of Elon Musk. I'm not afraid of the fascists. I'm afraid of the Vichy Democrats. I'm afraid of being betrayed by my own side. I'm afraid that the people, yes, we will ultimately succeed because we're pissed off. There's more of us than are them, and we're fighting for our very country. We're going to overwhelm them and take things back. But then we're just going to get this controlled opposition to come in and elect more Merrick Garlands and not repair any of the damage they've done. And we're back to square one again. That's what worries me.
Yeah, definitely. If you look at what's happening, the Republican Party has gone full fascist to the point that people can give Hitler salutes in public. But the problem, according to the media and the establishment Democrats, is a handful of trans athletes. That's what we should all be focused on. That's the problem, right? And again, they just accept the Republican talking points so often that it's starting to not seem accidental.